right, strap in, everybody. We're diving deep into Chapter 2, all about the crazy world of luck and risk.
Luck and risk.
You got it. Our listeners sent some seriously interesting stuff on, well, the psychology of money. And
I'm intrigued already.
we're going to try to figure out how all these random factors can really shape, financial outcomes.
It's funny. We always think about financial success as this straight line, like work hard, make smart choices, boom, you're at the top.
Right, right.
But this chapter, it kind of flips that idea on its head.
It totally does. Like, we want to shove these, complex human experiences into these neat little boxes.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's so much luck and risk swirling around, messing with everything. Investments, careers, the whole 9 yards.
You hit the nail on the head. This chapter, it really makes you realize that everybody's experience with money, it's unique. It's like shaped by this tiny sliver of financial history, the stuff they've seen firsthand.
Yeah.
Meaning, even the smartest folks out there
Oh, absolutely.
can have totally different viewpoints because they're basically working from different data sets.
It's like trying to figure out the entire ocean, but you're just looking at one drop of water.
Exactly.
It's limited.
And that limited view, it can really warp how we understand the whole financial world.
Oh, for sure.
The chapter uses the example of Ronald Reed. Remember him?
Oh, yeah, the janitor, right?
Yep, the janitor who built an $8 million fortune.
Wild.
His story, it might seem like a fluke,
Right.
but it highlights something powerful about the long game of building wealth.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to be making bank, to build serious wealth. It's all about consistency, being patient, and tapping into the power of compounding.
Yeah.
You let that work over decades.
Exactly.
So think about it, listeners. What are those small, consistent things you can do today to start building your own financial legacy?
Great question. And while we're on the topic of long-term thinking, you can't forget Warren Buffett.
Oh, yeah.
Classic example of how time can make even average returns turn into a massive amount of wealth.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Buffett's success, it's not just picking the right stocks. It's that he stayed in the game for over 70 years. Those gains just snowballed over time.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. This chapter compares him to Jim Simons, brilliant mathematician, amazing returns. But because Simon started investing later, his total wealth doesn't touch Buffett's.
Right.
Starting early, even with small amounts, gives you this massive advantage.
Thanks to compounding.
Exactly, like giving your money a head start in a race. The sooner those dollars are on the track, the more laps they can run. And by the end, well, they're way ahead.
And it's not just starting early, it's staying in the race. The chapter, it stresses this whole survival aspect, the key to long-term success.
So not just making the right moves, but avoiding those huge blunders that knock you out of the game completely. Kind of like Jenga, you can make a bunch of moves that seem fine, but pull the wrong block, the whole tower collapses.
Exactly. The chapter uses Jesse Livermore, the famous trader, made a fortune in the '29 crash, but then lost it all. Big reminder that getting rich and staying rich, two different games.
Livermore's story, it makes you realize that financial success, it's not just skill, it's managing risk, avoiding those single points of failure that can wipe you out completely. So listeners, do you have a plan to protect yourself from those pitfalls?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. And speaking of risk, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, pure luck.
Luck. This is where it gets interesting. Remember the bit about Bill Gates and his buddy, Kent Evans?
Uh-huh.
Both brilliant, both at that fancy lakeside school, one of the few with a computer back then. Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
It's insane. It shows how luck can play such a huge role, even for super talented people. Bill Gates, he had access to stuff, opportunities most kids back then could only dream of. And sadly, his friend Kent, just as bright, died in a mountaineering accident. Cut his potential short.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It makes you think about all the what-ifs, both for successes and failures. Challenges that idea that we're fully in control, forces us to admit, chance plays a part.
Recognizing that element of chance, both good and bad, it should make us a bit more humble, more forgiving, both in our own financial journeys and when we judge others.
It's a good reminder that we shouldn't jump to conclusions about why people succeed or fail with money. There's often a lot more to the story.
A lot more. And that leads to another important point, this idea that we shouldn't try to be perfectly rational about money. Pretty reasonable. That's the sweet spot.
This one really hits home for me. We're not robots. We're human beings. Emotions and all. Those emotions, they mess with our financial decisions.
All the time. Remember Harry Markowitz, Nobel Prize winner, came up with this groundbreaking theory on portfolio optimization. But guess what? for his own retirement savings.
He didn't use his own formula?
Nope. He went with a simple 50-50 split, stocks and bonds.
Because even geniuses want peace of mind.
Exactly. Sometimes making a pretty reasonable decision, even if it's not perfectly rational on paper, ends up better in the long run. Takes into account how we feel, not just the numbers.
It's a good reminder that the best financial decisions are sometimes the ones that let us sleep at night.
Absolutely. Gotta remember, we're complex. We've got unique experiences, emotions, goals. Ignore that stuff. And you end up with decisions that look great on a spreadsheet but leave you stressed and full of regret.
So how do we find that balance, logic, and emotion when it comes to money?
It's being aware of our biases, knowing what triggers us emotionally, finding that balance that works for you.
This makes me think of all the stories we hear about the economy and markets. This chapter dives into how those stories, true or not, can really shape our beliefs, our decisions.
It's crazy, right? We're wired for stories, and those narratives often have more power than hard data, even when the data says something totally different.
Happens all the time. People clinging to outdated economic theories, getting caught up in market hype just because of a good story, even if the numbers don't back it up.
The chapter uses the dot-com bubble as an example. That whole story about how the internet was going to change everything, it led to valuations that were completely bonkers. People were so caught up in the hype, they missed the red
It's
flags.
classic. A powerful story blinds us to the facts. And these stories, they can be good or bad, right? Remember that Russian professor who was sure the U.S. would fall apart in 2010?
Oh, yeah. Perfect example of how negativity bias sneaks into our financial thinking. The chapter points out that pessimism, it sticks more than optimism, partly because it plays on our tendency to fixate on threats. We're drawn to the dramatic worst-case stuff, especially when it comes from someone who sounds like they know what they're talking about.
Like, we're programmed to pay more attention to the scary stuff, even if the chances of it actually happening are tiny.
Right. That's why it's so important to pay attention to those narratives, to really think them through before letting them control our financial decisions.
So what's the cure for this narrative-driven thinking?
Healthy skepticism, questioning assumptions, looking for evidence beyond just a good story.
It sounds like being a savvy investor is kind of like being a good journalist. Double-checking your sources, digging deeper to find the truth.
Great analogy. It's about being critical thinkers, not just passively absorbing financial information.
This is gold. We've covered so much already. Limitations of personal experience, the power of compounding, the influence of stories. Where do we go from here?
Well, the chapter also goes into this idea of the hidden nature of real wealth.
Okay.
It's not always what you see, it's what's underneath.
You mean like how we see someone driving a fancy car, assume they're loaded, but we don't see their pile of credit card debt or that underwater mortgage?
Exactly. The chapter says true wealth is what you don't see. The savings, the investments, that security that gives you options and flexibility. It's building a strong base that lets you ride out the storms, go after your goals without stressing about money all the time.
Like that saying, rich is what you have, wealthy is what you keep.
Bingo. That difference matters. It shifts the focus from stuff to well-being. It's not about keeping up with the Joneses or trying to impress people with fancy stuff. It's making smart choices that fit your values and goals. What truly matters to you when it comes to financial success?
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Regularly. And this leads to another important concept. Building wealth, it often comes from frugality and efficiency, not just a big paycheck.
Reminds me of that 1970s oil crisis. Everyone thought we were running out of oil. But instead of this huge shortage, we adapted. Got more efficient, made new technology, learned to do more with less.
Exactly. Resourcefulness and ingenuity, they can be more valuable than just having more stuff. Same goes for personal finance. Building wealth is often about optimizing what you've got, making your money stretch, and making choices that line up with your long-term goals.
So it's not just how much you make, it's how much you keep and how well you manage it.
Precisely. Developing good habits, like tracking spending, making a budget, automating savings, that's powerful stuff. It's taking control of your money and making choices that help you reach your goals.
It's being intentional with every dollar, not just letting them disappear without a second thought.
You got it. Even those small, consistent actions, like making your own coffee instead of buying it every day, they add up to big savings over time.
Take care of the pennies, and the pounds will take care of themselves.
Exactly. And that same idea applies to bigger financial decisions. Being mindful of our spending, no matter how much we make, it frees up resources to invest and build wealth over time.
So we've talked about this hidden wealth, frugality, good habits. What other gems did this chapter have?
Well, it went into something that's super relevant these days, the increasing value of flexibility.
That makes sense. In a world where everyone's competing for the same opportunities, being able to adapt, to pivot, that's a huge plus.
No doubt. The chapter argues that being smart isn't enough anymore. With so much global talent, being able to learn new skills, roll with changes, and jump on unexpected opportunities, that's becoming more and more important.
So not just being smart, but adaptable, resourceful.
Exactly. And that adaptability applies to our finances too. Being able to adjust our spending, savings, even our careers. It lets us handle unexpected stuff and grab those new opportunities when they pop up.
It's like having that margin of safety, that flexibility to roll with the punches and come out stronger on the other side.
You got it. A solid financial foundation. Emergency fund, manageable debt, long-term investment strategy. It's powerful stuff. Gives you the freedom to make choices that match your values and goals, even when things go sideways.
So it's about building that resilience, that ability to bounce back from setbacks and keep going no matter what.
Resilience. And it's not just about the money. It's about a mindset that welcomes change, learns from challenges, and stays focused on the long term, not those little setbacks along the way.
This deep dive is really making me rethink money. It's not just numbers and spreadsheets. It's psychology, it's stories, it's our values and goals. It's finding that balance between risk and security.
It's understanding what's going on, both inside us and in the world around us, and making choices that help us live fulfilling lives on our own terms.
Love that. Okay, we've covered a lot, but there's more to explore. What else did that chapter offer?
It dug into this fascinating concept, the psychological cost of investing.
You mean like all the stress and anxiety from watching your investments go up and down?
Exactly. The chapter argued that market volatility, something we often see as bad, is actually the price we pay for those potentially higher returns.
It's like the entry fee to the stock market roller coaster.
Exactly. If we think of volatility as a fee, not a penalty, it helps us handle those emotions and stay focused on the long game.
So instead of freaking out every time the market dips, we accept it as part of the deal,
Right.
right? Like a membership to a club that could give you big growth in the long run.
You got it. And that acceptance is easier when you're clear about your goals, your risk tolerance, and how markets have behaved historically. The chapter really stressed having that long-term view, focusing on the overall performance, not those day-to-day swings.
Stay calm, stay focused. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. And that brings us to another super important point, the limits of using history to predict the future.
Yeah. Just because the market has bounced back before doesn't mean it's guaranteed to do it again, right?
Exactly. The chapter explored this idea that while history can teach us a lot, it's not a crystal ball. The world's always changing, new technologies, unexpected events, and people are unpredictable.
Like trying to navigate a maze with a map from a different time. The layout might be similar, but there are going to be new obstacles, dead ends that weren't there before.
Precisely. So it's important to be adaptable, open to new info, and not get too stuck on past patterns when we're making financial decisions. The chapter really emphasized embracing uncertainty, knowing what we don't know, and being skeptical of those predictions that claim to know the future for sure.
So be humble, be realistic, and recognize that the future isn't set in stone.
Absolutely. That recognition can be freeing because it lets go of the illusion of control. We can focus on what we can influence, our decisions, our habits, our mindset, instead of trying to predict what's unpredictable.
I love this stuff. It's like we're peeling back the layers of all that traditional financial wisdom, revealing a more nuanced, human-centered way to handle money.
It's understanding that personal finance isn't just about numbers, it's about psychology, it's about narratives, it's about values and goals, and finding that balance between risk and security.
It's really coming together now. We talk about history not being a perfect predictor, embracing uncertainty, focusing on what we can control. What else did that chapter dig into?
Well, it brought up something really important, especially now with so much information out there. Being critical about the financial stuff we see.
Oh, yeah, for sure. With all the advice and opinions flying around, it's easy to get lost, confused even.
Absolutely. The chapter used Bernie Madoff as an example. He tricked even smart investors for years, even though there were warning signs. It shows how easy it is to fall for a good story, especially when it promises easy money and big returns.
So it's about being careful, right? Not just believing everything we hear, but really thinking it through, questioning things, looking for proof.
You got it. And that carefulness should apply to everything financial, news articles, investment advice, social media, even what our friends and family tell us. It's about thinking critically, learning to separate the noise from the real insights.
Like becoming a financial detective. Gathering clues, checking sources, always asking, does this make sense? Is there something hidden here? What's the bigger picture?
Spot on. And that detective work is crucial when we're trying to spot scams, those investments that sound too good to be true. The chapter warned about those get-rich-quick schemes. It said to look for reliable sources, always put safety first, not the promise of big returns with hidden risks.
So, protecting ourselves, being informed, being cautious, not falling for those who try to take advantage of us.
Exactly. And part of that protection is knowing our own biases, how our emotions can affect things. The chapter pointed out how fear, greed, wanting to fit in, they can all push us to make bad decisions.
Yeah, like buying that fancy car, not because we need it, but because we want to impress people, fit in with a certain crowd.
Right. And those emotional choices often lead to regrets later on. The chapter said to be honest with ourselves about what's really motivating us, put our own values and goals first, not what others think, make choices that are good for us long term, not just a quick thrill.
This is all such good advice. Be aware, be informed, be critical, and be true to ourselves about money.
It's about having a healthy relationship with money, one that helps us reach our goals, live good lives, and handle the tricky financial world with smarts and wisdom.
We've covered so much in this deep dive. The power of stories, thinking critically, managing emotions, and the importance of security. What else did that chapter highlight?
It talked about something really fundamental to how we make financial decisions, this idea that we all operate with incomplete information, filling in the gaps with our own personal stories.
Oh, that's so true. We see someone make a financial choice that seems crazy to us, but to them it makes perfect sense based on what they've been through, what they believe.
Exactly. The chapter used the example of lottery tickets. People struggling financially often spend way too much on something with terrible odds. It seems irrational, but it makes sense when you consider the stories around lotteries. The dream of winning big, the belief that luck can fix everything, the sense of community, the shared hope.
So, what seems irrational to one person is totally logical to another, depending on their point of view.
Exactly. And realizing that, it helps us be more understanding, less judgmental about money choices. It reminds us that everyone has their own story, their own struggles, their own way of seeing things.
Don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes.
Exactly. Applies to money, too. Before we judge or give advice, we should try to see things from their side, their goals, what's holding them back, the story shaping their decisions.
This deep dive is really making me question my own assumptions about money, be more open-minded about what others do.
It's realizing there's no one right way to handle money. What works for one person might not work for another. What looks like a bad choice to us can be totally reasonable given their situation.
I love that. Okay, we've covered tons, but there's more. What other insights did that chapter have?
It went deep into something really important for those of us who want to build lasting wealth, the power of compounding.
Ah, yes. The snowball effect.
Hmm.
Small, consistent investments growing like crazy over time.
Precisely. The chapter stressed that compounding isn't just math, it's a force of nature that can create amazing results. Start early, invest regularly, leave it alone, and watch it grow over time.
Like planting a tiny seed that grows into a giant tree. The longer it grows, the stronger and more magnificent it gets.
Exactly. Same with investing. The sooner we start, the more time compounding has to work, the bigger the potential. The chapter also talked about patience and discipline, resisting those tempting quick returns or trying to time the market. Focus on a steady, long-term plan.
The long game. Not getting caught up in those short-term ups and downs, but keeping our eyes on the prize, letting time do its thing.
You got it. And that long game gets even better when we add reinvesting our earnings. Dividends, capital gains, they all fuel the fire, making our wealth grow even faster.
It's adding fuel to the fire, for sure. The more we put back in, the faster it grows.
Exactly. That's why good habits like automating investments, resisting the urge to spend those earnings, they're so important for success in the long run.
This deep dive is really showing me the incredible power of compounding. It's like a secret weapon we can all use to build wealth over time.
It's a force of nature that rewards patience, discipline, and a long-term view. Understanding it, using its power, we can create a future that's much more secure and fulfilling.
I'm so inspired. Okay, we've talked about compounding, reinvesting, and the need for patience and discipline. What other insights did that chapter offer?
Well, it also went into something essential for anyone who wants to confidently navigate the financial world, the importance of understanding and managing
Oh,
risk.
for sure. The greater the risk, the greater the potential reward, but also the greater the potential for loss.
Right, exactly. The chapter emphasized that risk is a part of investing. We can't avoid it. Understanding the different types of risk and how to handle them is crucial for making smart decisions. It highlighted diversification, spreading our investments across different types of assets, industries, even countries, to lessen the blow if one investment goes bad.
It's like they say, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right. By spreading our investments out, we create a safety net. The chapter also discussed the importance of knowing our own risk tolerance, how much potential loss we're comfortable with, and choosing investments that fit.
So finding that sweet spot, balancing the chance for growth with the level of risk we can handle.
Exactly. And that balance is different for everyone, depending on their situation, their goals, and how comfortable they are with those market ups and downs. The chapter encouraged people to be honest about their risk tolerance, avoid investments that make them anxious, and seek advice from a trusted financial advisor if they need it.
This deep dive is really making me appreciate the importance of understanding and managing risk. It's not about avoiding it completely, but making smart choices that fit our own risk profiles.
It's about accepting that uncertainty is part of investing, having a clear plan to lessen those risks, and making choices that let us chase those goals with confidence and peace of mind.
Okay, we've discussed diversification, knowing our risk tolerance, and getting advice from a trusted source. What other insights did that chapter offer about managing risk?
It also brought up this idea of a margin of safety, something people don't always think about.
Ah, that's so smart. It's like building a buffer into our financial plans, right? Just in case for those unexpected costs or if the market takes a dive.
Exactly. The chapter really pushed having that margin of safety. Could be an emergency fund, a conservative savings rate, or a diversified portfolio. It can be a game changer when it comes to handling those tough financial times and staying focused on our goals.
Like a financial cushion. Hit a bump in the road, but you don't completely veer off course. Makes me think about how much our emotions can mess with our money decisions. I know I've made some rash choices when I let fear or greed take over.
That's a great point, and the chapter touches on that too. It dives into how our natural tendencies, fear, greed, following the crowd, they can push us to make these impulsive choices that often backfire. Being aware of those emotional biases, that's a huge part of managing risk.
So it's like having a financial therapist, someone to help us see those emotional triggers and figure out healthy ways to deal with the market's ups and downs.
Exactly. While not everyone needs a therapist, it's super important to be aware of how we react emotionally to money stuff. Don't make decisions based solely on fear or greed, and don't hesitate to reach out to someone you trust, a friend, family, or a financial advisor if those emotions are getting the best of you.
This deep dive is really showing me how important it is to understand and manage those emotional biases. It's not about ignoring them completely, but about knowing they're there and finding ways to make rational choices, even when the most it's making us sweat.
Absolutely. It's about having a healthy relationship with money, one that helps you reach your goals without getting tripped up by your own emotions. And speaking of healthy habits, the chapter also talks about patience and delayed gratification. Those can be tough in today's world where everything's instant.
It's true. Things move so fast, it's easy to fall into that trap of wanting everything right now.
Sure.
But when it comes to building wealth, slow and steady often wins the race.
Exactly. The chapter emphasizes that building wealth, it takes time, discipline, and being willing to wait for the payoff, like most things worth having. It's about focusing on those long-term goals, being patient with the process, and not giving in to that temptation to sacrifice future financial security for something that feels good right now.
I like that marshmallow experiment, right? The kids who could resist that marshmallow got two later. Such a good lesson in delayed gratification.
Perfect analogy. Same principle applies to investing. Think about compounding, how much your money can grow when you invest consistently over time. It's about resisting that urge to cash out early or chase those quick returns. Trust that the long game is where the real rewards are.
This deep dive is making me really appreciate patience and delayed gratification. True wealth, it's built over time, brick by brick. And the rewards of being patient, they're way better than those fleeting pleasures.
It's about shifting your mindset. Instead of focusing on what you don't have, recognize everything you've already accomplished. Celebrate those wins no matter how small.
I love that. Celebrating wins keeps us going. But everyone makes mistakes along the way, right? How do we handle those financial blunders?
Well, the chapter encourages us to see those mistakes not as failures, but as chances to learn. Recognize the mistake, figure out what went wrong, and adjust your approach. It's all part of the process.
So embrace those mistakes. They're stepping stones to financial wisdom. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Exactly. And speaking of strength, a major theme throughout this chapter is aligning our financial decisions with our values and goals.
Makes total sense. Money should be a tool to help us live the life we want, not just a goal in itself.
Absolutely. Money is a means to an end. Your choices should reflect your values, what's important to you, and what you're aiming for. Figure out what truly matters. Maybe it's security, the freedom to follow your passions, or making a difference in the world. And use your money to get there.
This deep dive has been incredible. It's really changed how I think about money and success.
So glad to hear that. Remember, keep the long view in mind, be mindful of your choices, learn from what happens, and enjoy the ride.
And remember, financial success isn't just about the numbers. It's about creating a life that reflects who you are, makes you happy, and lets you make a positive impact. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. Did you enjoy what you heard? Want to buy this book? Please use the link in the description to support the channel.